The feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable to us. When we feel helpless, we feel miserable. Who wants less power? Everyone wants more. In the world today, however, it is dangerous to seem too power-hungry, to be overt with your power moves. You have to seem fair and decent. So you need to be subtle, congenial, yet cunning, democratic, yet devious. Outwardly, you must seem to respect the nicest, but inwardly, unless you are a fool, you learn quickly to be prudent. Place your iron hand inside a velvet glove. You have to master the art of indirection, learn to seduce, charm, deceive, and subtly outmaneuver your opponents. You will attain the height of power. You will be able to make people bend to your will without them realizing what you have done. And if they do not realize what you have done, they will neither resent nor resist you. To some people, the notion of consciously playing power games, no matter how indirect, seems evil, a social, a relic of the past. They believe they can opt out of the game by behaving in ways that have nothing to do with power. You must be aware of such people, for while they express such opinions outwardly, they are often among the most adept players at power. They utilize strategies that cleverly disguised the nature of the manipulation involved. These types, for example, will often display their weaknesses and lack of power as a kind of moral virtue. But true powerlessness, without any motive of self-interest, would not publicize its weakness to gain sympathy or respect. Another strategy of supposed non-player is to demand equality in every area of life. Everyone must be treated alike, whatever their status and strength. But if, to avoid the taint of power, you are tend to treat everyone equally and fairly, you will confront the problem that some people do certain things better than others. Treating everyone equally means ignoring their differences, elevating the less skillful and suppressing those who excel. Yet another way of avoiding the game would be perfect honesty and straightforwardness, since one of the main techniques of those who seek power is deceit and secrecy. But being perfectly honest will inevitably hurt and insult a great many people, some of whom will choose to injure you in return. No one will see your honest statement as completely objective and free from personal motivation. And they will be right. In truth, the use of honesty is indeed a power strategy, intended to convince people of one's noble, good-hearted, selfless character. It is a form of persuasion, even a subtle form of coercion. But be aware of those players who claim to be a non-player. Law 21. Seem dumber than your mark. Once again, those who make a show or display of innocence are the least innocent of all. You can recognize the supposed non-players by the way they flaunt their moral qualities, their piety, their exquisite sense of justice. But since all of us hunger for power, and almost all of our actions are again in it, the non-player are merely throwing dust in our eyes, distracting us from their power plays with their air of moral superiority. If you observe them closely, you will see, in fact, that they are often the ones most skillful at indirect manipulation, even if some of them practice it unconsciously. There is no use in trying to opt out of the game. That will only render you powerless, and powerlessness will make you miserable. Instead of struggling against the invincible, instead of arguing and whining and feeling guilty, it is far better to excel a power. In fact, the better you are dealing with power, the better friend, lover, husband, wife, and person you become. By following the route of perfect courtier, you learn to make others feel better about themselves. becoming a source of pleasure to them. They will grow dependent on your abilities and desires of your presence. By mastering the 48 laws in this book, you spare others the pain that comes from bungling with power by playing with fire without knowing it. Properties. If the game of power is inescapable, better to be an artist than a denier or a bungler. Learning the game of power requires a certain way of looking at the world, is shifting of perspective. It takes effort and years of practice, for much of the game may not come naturally. Certain basic skills are required, and once you master the skills, you will be able to apply the laws of power more easily. Most important of these skills, and power's crucial foundation, is the ability to master your emotions. An emotional response to the situation is the single greatest barrier to power. Mistake that will cost you a lot more than any temporary satisfaction you might gain by expressing your feelings. Emotion cloud reason, and if you cannot see the situation, you cannot prepare for and respond to it with any degree of control. Anger is the most destructive emotional responses, for the cloud is your vision the most. It also has a ripple effect that invariably makes situation less controllable and heightens your enemy's resolve. If you're trying to destroy an enemy who has hurt you, far better to keep him off guard by feigning friendliness and showing your anger. Love and affection are also potentially destructive in that they blind you to the often self-serving interests of those whom you least suspect of playing a power game. You cannot repress anger or love or avoid feeling them, and you should not try. But you should be careful about how you express them, and most important, they should never influence your plans and strategies in any way. Related to mastering your emotions is the ability to distance yourself from the present moment and think objectively about the past and future. You must be able to look in both directions at once, the better to handle the danger from wherever it comes. Such is the face you must create for yourself, one face looking continuously to the future and the other to the past. For the future, nothing to catch you by surprise, because you are constantly imagining problems before they arise. Instead of spending your time dreaming of your plan's happy ending, you must work on calculating every possible permutation and pitfall that might emerge in it. The further you see, the more steps ahead you plan, the more powerful you become. The other face of you looks constantly to the past, though not to remember past hurts or bear grudges. That would only curb your power. Half of the game is learning how to forget these events in the past that eat away at you and cloud your reason. The real purpose of the backward-glancing eye is to educate yourself constantly. You look at the past to learn from those who come before you. Then, having looked to the past, you look closer at hand to your own actions and those of your friends. This is the most vital school you can learn from, because it comes from personal experience. You begin by examining the mistakes you have made in the past, the ones that have most grievously held you back. You analyze them in terms of the 48 laws of power, and you extract from them a lesson and an oath. I shall never repeat such a mistake. I shall never fall into such a trap again. If you can evaluate and observe yourself in this way, you can learn to break the patterns of the past, an immensely valuable skill. Power requires the ability to play with appearances. To this end, you must learn to wear many masks and keep a bag full of deceptive tricks. Deception and masquerade should not be seen as ugly or immortal. All human interaction requires deception on many levels, and in some ways what separates human from animals is an ability to lie and deceive. It is the privilege of the gods to use deceptive art. A great man is judged by his ability to rival the craftiness of the gods, stealing some of the divine power by matching them in wits and deception. Deception is the developed art of civilization and the most potent weapon in the game of power. You cannot succeed at deception unless you take a somewhat distant approach to yourself, unless you can be many different people, wearing the mask that the day and the moment require. With such a flexible approach to all appearances, including your own, you lose a lot of the inward heaviness that holds people down. Make your face as malleable as the doctor's. Work to conceal your intentions from others. Practice luring people into traps. Playing with appearances and mastering art of deception are among the aesthetic pleasures of life. They are also key components in the acquisition of power. If deception is the most potent weapon in your arsenal, then patience in all things is your crucial shield. Patience will protect you from making moronic blunders. Like mastering your emotions, patience is a skill. It does not come naturally. But nothing about power is natural. Power is more godlike than anything in the natural world. And patience is the supreme virtue of the gods, who have nothing but time. Everything good will happen, the grass will grow again, if you give it time and see several steps into the future. Impatience, on the other hand, only makes you look weak. It's a principal impediment to power. Power is essentially amoral, and one of the most important skills to acquire is the ability to see circumstances rather than good or evil. Power is a game. This cannot be repeated too often. And in games, you do not judge your opponent by their intentions, but by the effect of their actions. You measure their strategy and their power by what you can see and feel. How often are someone's intentions made the issue only to cloud and deceive? What does it matter if another player, your friend or rival, intended good things and had only your interests at heart, if the effects of his action lead to so much ruin and confusion? It is only natural for people to cover up their actions with all kinds of justifications, always assuming that they have acted out of goodness. I must learn to inwardly laugh each time you hear this and never get caught up in gauging someone's intentions and actions through a set of moral judgments that are really an excuse for an accumulation of power. It is a game. Your opponent sits opposite you. Both of you behave as a gentleman or ladies, observing the rules of the game and taking nothing personally. You play with a strategy, and you observe your opponent's moves with as much calmness as you can muster. In the end, you will appreciate the politeness of those who are playing with more than their good and sweet intentions. Train your eye to follow the result of their moves, the outward circumstances, and do not be distracted by anything else. Half of your mastery of power comes from what you do not do, what you do not allow yourself to get dragged into. For this skill, you must learn to judge all things by what they cost you. The value of a thing sometimes lies not in what one attains with it, but in what one pays for it, what it costs us. Perhaps you will attain your goal, and a worthy goal at that, but at what price? Apply this to standard to everything, including whether to collaborate with other people or come to the aid. In the end, life is short, opportunities are few, and you have only so much energy to draw on. And in this sense, time is as important a consideration as any other. Never waste valuable time or mental peace of mind on the affairs of others that is too high a price to pay. Power is a social game. To learn and master it, you must develop the ability to study and understand people. You must recognize motivations and see through the cloud of dust with which people surrounded actions. An understanding of people's hidden motives is the single greatest piece of knowledge you can have in acquiring power. It opens up endless possibilities of deception, seduction, and manipulation. Never discriminate as to whom you study and whom you trust. Never trust anyone completely, and study everyone, including friends and loved ones. Finally, you must learn always to take indirect route to power. Disguise your cunning. Your moves must be planned and developed in the least obvious way. Play training yourself to be indirect. You can thrive in the modern court, appearing paragon of decency, while being the consummate manipulator. Any man who tries to be good all the time is bound to ruin among the great number who are not good. Hence, a prince who wants to keep his authority must learn how not to be good and use that knowledge, or refrain from using it as necessity requires.